Thank you and good afternoon. I'm Daniel Diermeier. I'm the Chancellor of Vanderbilt University. And today I'm excited to share firsthand a couple of sustainable solutions, including a new innovative collaboration with the nonprofit organization Carbon Vault that has put Vanderbilt on track to become the first member of the Association of American Universities. That's the Association of America's leading research universities to achieve carbon neutrality. Vanderbilt will achieve this tremendous milestone this year, which is decades ahead of our initial sustainability goal, as you saw in the initial slide. Sustainability as a topic, and of course the issue of climate change, is not only first and foremost for many of us, and one of the great problems that the global community is facing, but it also provides an opportunity for us to engage our missions, to educate leaders of tomorrow, to engage in path-breaking research, and also to be a place where we can develop innovative solutions that help advance solutions for important policy problems that the world is dealing with. So this new collaboration allows us to advance this agenda significantly, and we're particularly happy that we are partnering with Climate Vault on moving forwards on that. And just to be clear, we have a portfolio of activities here. And so this collaboration yields a major advancement, and we think a very exciting and innovative solution, but it's by no means the only or the last step in our efforts. There's a whole variety of activities and partnerships that we've engaged in that really helped us to accomplish our climate goals way ahead of schedule. So we always want to think about as we're building a portfolio, we will always want to look for the next level of innovative solutions that will help us to find new approaches of how to deal with sustainability and climate change within the context of the university, always understanding that what we want to do there are solutions that then can be adapted by others and can spread to not only other universities, but other important institutions around the world. Today, it's my pleasure in this conversation to be joined by our very own Vice Chancellor for Administration, Eric Kopstain, who has spearheaded and led our Future VU and sustainability initiatives across campus. And then I'm also joined today with the distinguished and environmental economist, Michael Greenstone. Michael is the Milton Friedman Distinguished Professor in Economics and the Director of the Energy Policy Institute at the University of Chicago, and who led the team that founded Climate Vault. Professor Greenstone previously served as the Chief Economist for President Barack Obama's Council of Economic Advisors, where he co-led the development of the United States government's Social Cost of Carbon project. He is an elected member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, a fellow of the Econometrics Society, and a former editor of the Journal of Political Economy. And his research has really focused on uncovering the benefits and the costs of environmental quality and society's energy choices choices. And his work has really influenced policy globally, including in India, China, and really across the world. Currently, he's working on testing innovative ways to increase energy access and improve the efficiency of environmental regulations around the world. He is also been one of the co-founder and co-director of Climate Vault. As I mentioned before, we'll go back to that in a minute, but he's also providing research and is heavily engaged in estimates of the local and global impacts of climate change. That's an important project because it really kind of makes the impact of climate change almost you can realize it at the global level. That's part of his work at the Climate Impact Lab. And then finally, he also created the Air Quality Life Index, which provides a measure of the gain in life expectancy that communities would experience if their air pollution concentration complied with global and national standards. And again, this has led to important policy changes both in China and in India. So I want to thank you, Michael, for joining me and Eric today for this conversation. And before we get started with the conversation, I want to say a little bit about this new project that we're all here to discuss today. So at Vanderbilt, we've always been looking for new opportunities to accelerate our sustainability goals. And initially, we announced a goal to power our campus entirely through renewable energy and reach carbon neutrality by 2050. And we are now accelerating that goal through the collaboration with Climate Vault, which will enable us to bridge our long-term sustainability plans really with a strategy that focuses on immediate impact and allow us to scale change quickly. Climate Vault provides a new innovative and verifiable solution for carbon reduction using government-regulated markets. So the idea here and the mission is to significantly reduce carbon dioxide pollution, one of the leading causes of climate change, while supporting innovation in carbon removal technologies needed to eliminate historical levels of CO2. The way this works is fundamentally is that every pollution allowance permit that Vanderbilt purchases through Climate Vault removes a permit from circulation in a regulated market, thereby reducing the overall amount of carbon emissions allowed by government regulation. It's fundamentally a model where we use government regulated markets to store away or withdraw the ability to produce that CO2 in this context. So rather than using technology to store it, we're using markets to store it. And we go back into that in a little bit more detail, because these permits are then locked away through Climate Vault and either are permanently retired or leveraged to provide grants for emerging carbon removal technologies. So either you do it physically or you do it through the economic mechanisms here. The impact on CO2 levels is material. So we love this collaboration because it allows us to advance our action in this area right now, where we can continue to work in tandem with our partners and inside the university on our ongoing efforts. So I'm now going to open the floor to Michael and Eric to discuss the various aspects of both this new collaboration and our continuing sustainability efforts on campus and across our region. I'll now start by asking Eric, why is it so important for us to really engage in this collaboration with Climate Vault? Give us a little bit of the context for our thinking on this.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chancellor Diermeier. You know, in your remarks, you touched on this earlier, and my answer to your question really begins by noting that there's overwhelming scientific consensus that human activities are driving climate change, and so many studies attribute both incremental change and extreme weather events to human activity. We know the outcome from climate change includes things like extreme heat, natural disasters, sea level rise, species extinction, climate refugees, food insecurity, and reduced economic growth, among other things. And so at Vanderbilt, you know, we acknowledge these challenges, and with these truly pressing issues in mind, we feel that making a difference is not just within our reach, but as stewards of the institution, taking action now to create positive change is really our responsibility. So when I first met Michael last year, Vanderbilt had been examining approaches to carbon reduction for some time, including what I might call traditional carbon offset strategies. And we saw, you know, many potential deficits related to traditional approaches, and really became convinced that Climate Vault's approach is cutting edge and can serve as a catalyst, and as you said, a bridging mechanism to our campus, whereby we offset our current emissions now while working on additional solutions to eliminate our footprint.
Thank you. So I'm going to come back to Michael. Tell us a little bit more exactly about how this works, and you know, and how these partnerships work with Vanderbilt and with others. I think you're muted still.
Thank you very much for having me, and for the collaboration, which we're incredibly excited about. And in many respects, I think you guys have put it best, which is what Climate Vault can help organizations do is who have laudable goals like becoming carbon neutral in 2050, say, wait a minute, let's, you know, here's the easy button for doing it now. And that can be part of a broader strategy of, and I think Vanderbilt's case, moving to low carbon energy sources or zero carbon energy sources. It's not feasible to do that all at once in many places of the world, most places of the world. And Climate Vault provides kind of a way to build a path to doing that. In terms of the way it works, the idea of offsets have been around for about a quarter of a century. They date back to the mid-1990s and the Clean Development Mechanism that came out of the Kyoto Protocol. And I think what has been the only thing that's surprising to me is that people continue to be surprised that traditional offsets fail to deliver the promised carbon reductions. I would say every 6 months or every year, there's a scandal that the kind of standard approach to offsets, often forestry projects where payments are made to farmers not to cut down their trees, fail to deliver the carbon reduction. And what struck me, and the reason we started Climate Vault was, that's a very complicated contract. It's very hard to enforce to get someone not to cut down trees. It's hard to monitor. There's an easy button laying there, and that easy button is governments around the world, and say in California, in Quebec, and 10 New England states, have banded together to build what are called cap and trade markets for CO2. And those markets require that they restrict the amount of carbon pollution, and they require that if you're going to pollute, you have to hold a permit. And the first step of what we do is we go into those markets on behalf of, say, Vanderbilt, and outbid polluters for the right to pollute, and effectively take those rights out of the market, and that reduces the total pollution or the total amount of CO2 that can occur. And you don't have to worry about verifiability. The governments are doing that for you for free. You can free ride on that. And it's the second great advantage of those markets is that they're designed to get you the best deal possible. And so really a different way to put it is the most carbon for your buck. And you don't have to become an expert on where the cheapest ton of carbon can be found. The markets deliver that to you essentially free of charge. So I think that's the kind of the heart of what we do. And then I'm sure we'll get into talking about the innovation with carbon removal. And that's, I think, a very nice fit with Vanderbilt. But the starting point is there are organizations like Vanderbilt that are very forward leaning and are saying, no, we want to be carbon neutral now, but there's not a good path. And we can kind of serve as a bridging mechanism, almost free riding on these existing cap and trade markets.
Michael, let me follow up on the last thing you just said, because the kind of vaulting or like storing away of CO2 permits is one part of what a Climate Vault is doing. But there's the other part, which is just kind of, spurring innovation in carbon removal technologies. Tell us about how that works as well, because I think that's the other part of the model that makes it particularly interesting.
Yeah. So let me just, if you'll, ask an academic a question and you might get 3 answers. So let me probably have 2. I won't go to the third. So the first answer, part of the answer is that anyone who's like a climate nerd, like I am, there's all these plans for bringing the world into kind of balance with respect to climate change, whether it be 2-degree goal or 1.5-degree C goal. And there's this remarkable, and then there's this time path of emissions. We have to cut emissions by this much year by year. There's this magical moment that arrives where the planet goes carbon negative. Okay, so whoa, what does that mean? That's kind of a strange idea. And what the carbon negative means is, yes, of course, there's still going to be CO2 emissions. There'll be some things that we can't use renewables for, or low carbon energy sources. But how they get to negative is, they don't say it, but the world is suddenly filled with machines that pull carbon out of the atmosphere. They're called carbon dioxide removal technologies. And the strange thing about that is no one ever talks about, well, where are those machines supposed to come from? And I'm a somewhat, I believe in economics and markets, and I think it's very unlikely that one gets lots of innovation without there being a payment for it, without there being a price signal. And no one ever talks about what that is. And so the second part of what we do is to provide the world's first large-scale ecosystem, or almost a market for carbon removal. It doesn't exist anywhere in the world. And the idea is we have all these permits that we have purchased on behalf of Vanderbilt sitting in our vault, and we are announced to the world, and we're going to make our first announcement this summer. Come one, come all, if you have a good idea for carbon removal, and by the way, I know there's some faculty at Vanderbilt who are working on these technologies. If you come and you have a reliable idea, we will trade you one of our permits for a ton of carbon removal. And that's exactly the price signal that's missing. And so we don't have to rely on unicorns and rainbows and fairies. Producing carbon removal will get Climate Vault through, or Vanderbilt plus Climate Vault is helping to create this market, which should lead to the innovation that the world so desperately needs for confronting climate change. So I hope that was only 2 and not 3 answers.
Well, maybe we get to the third one later. We'll see. I'm going to turn it back to Eric for a moment. And Eric, I'd love to ask you about some of the sustainability initiatives that we have been involved with over the last years. And you've played a leading role in putting them together, bringing them to fruition. I'm just going to mention our large-scale renewable energy partnership with the Tennessee Valley Authority and National Electric Services. That partnership also was the first of its kind in our area, and has allowed Vanderbilt to become an incubator of solutions that can now be replicated throughout the region and are being replicated by others. So tell us a little bit of an update on these recent initiatives and what we're working on in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. So, as you touched on, the large-scale renewable energy initiative with TVA and NES is a really big step for Vanderbilt and the region, because it provides a mechanism for Vanderbilt to procure 100% of its annual electric consumption from green sources. And again, it's scalable. So this program is not bespoke just for Vanderbilt University. It was designed to serve Vanderbilt's desires to be 100% renewable in terms of electricity, but other institutions and employers of the region can also subscribe to this program to make their electricity green. And that's one way I think we've been providing leaders and having others in the region, notably Metro Nashville, sign up for the program and make their electricity green as well. So that's one. Additional initiatives that we're working on include things like the electrification of Vanderbilt's vehicle fleet. And that's a place where we know we can play a leading role on campus, and we'll learn how to best implement and also finance the charging infrastructure that's necessary to support fleet electrification. And as we do that, we're going to learn, and we're also going to be an example across the city and the region. So the city and the region, I think, will benefit as well, because I think we will be ahead of the curve on that in that regard. We're also expanding our Move VU mobility program, and we're doing that by adding additional parking spaces into our daily parking program, which I think will be more popular than ever as we move into a hybrid work environment in Vanderbilt. And we're also implementing green commute incentives to incentivize the use of public transportation, carpooling, biking, walking. And finally, the final initiative that I'm really excited about that's underway involves us exploring in earnest right now new models for utility production, distribution, and infrastructure investment through partnerships with third-party energy providers that we think can create value in several ways for Vanderbilt, including, importantly here, by accelerating the evolution of our campus energy infrastructure into greener approaches. So those are just a few, Daniel, that we're working on.
Great. I think what we see here is a combination of different approaches. I'm going to ask Michael one more question, then I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience, and so that we get to those as well. But what's interesting to me is I think there's a lot of focus typically on solutions to carbon challenges that come, I'm going to call it, from engineering and the natural sciences. So they're fundamentally about technologies. But then if you think about, Carbon Vault and our partnership, then the same is true with the Tennessee Valley Authority. Is they're if you will, they're innovations on economic mechanisms and policy approaches. Is that you can say, well, we can partner with a public utility to effectively co-invest in sustainable, in this case, solar technology, and move the entire mix of electricity provision in the direction of sustainable energy, rather than just focusing on ourselves. And similarly, you have this, they have the idea of kind of utilizing and leveraging existing CO2 permit markets that operate at a regional level, but of course having an impact globally if we're reducing, CO2. Like Michael, I'd just love to get your point of view on that, of how do we, how do we think about the interaction or the interplay between innovation on the technology side and innovation on the policy and economic mechanism side?
Yeah, I think actually a fault line in the kind of climate, in the focus on climate, is a running to kind of engineering solutions. I want to be able to put my hand on the machine that is going to do exactly the thing that we need to do for CO2. And that's important, but I think it's important to complement that with markets. And the power of markets is that we might not know in advance exactly which machine or which fuel source we should switch to. And I think Vanderbilt playing a leadership role and demonstrating the role of markets in helping to achieve goals, I think is honestly is already having an enormous impact. And let me try to talk about that for a minute. I think like what's great about Vanderbilt going carbon neutral is it's important to go carbon neutral and doing it 30 years in advance. But I think even more, there's kind of a leverage ratio here. And so what do I mean by that? People look to universities to learn about the world and often think of universities as laboratories. Great scientific innovations occur in them. But Vanderbilt, I can already tell you very directly, is already influencing many other organizations. And Climate Vault has several other donors, 15 other donors at this point, organizations. And several of them were like, well, if it's good enough for Vanderbilt, then it's good enough for us. And, we wouldn't have been able to get across the finish line internally without kind of having the external validation from Vanderbilt. And, we don't have the time to think about things so carefully as people do at universities. And so in many respects, what I appreciate about this partnership is it's much more than the tons that are being reduced at Vanderbilt, but it's unleashing reductions in CO2 in for many other organizations. And, I will just tease for a second, there's a very, high profile industry that has received a lot of attention for its energy consumption lately. We might call it cryptocurrencies, and in particular Bitcoin. And I can say, without revealing too much, there's very likely to be an announcement about a major Bitcoin provider that was influenced by the relationship with Vanderbilt and is going to use that as kind of a way to get themselves across the finish line to go carbon neutral today. So I think the broader point I just want to make is demonstrating the power of markets and the fact that other people rely on universities to learn about the world. I think that combination is very powerful one, and why we're so excited to be working with Vanderbilt.
Great. So I have a couple of questions here, and I'm just gonna, just go through a few of them here, throw some to Eric, some to Michael, and of course, invite both of you to kind of comment to each one of them. So give me a sense, Eric, I think here's one question about, how do we, this relates a little bit on what Michael was talking about. It's like, how will Vanderbilt leverage its accomplishment in reaching carbon neutrality to help other organizations to achieve their goals effectively as well? So we've heard this now in this context, but maybe you can also talk about some of the other things that we're doing. I'm thinking about, our partnership with the Tennessee Valley Authority and National Electric Services, but other aspects too, where this kind of idea of the campus as a lab to kind of demonstrate and provide evidence that these solutions can work in our context, and then serve as a model for others to adopt them. So give us a couple of examples of how this idea of the campus of a lab and demonstration for others, proof point for others, if you will, it kind of works in practice.
Yeah, absolutely, Daniel. Thank you. Again, I'll start with a little bit more about the TVA NES Vanderbilt partnership. So really what happened there was we determined that Vanderbilt wanted to have 100% renewable energy on campus and wanted all of its electrical consumption as a result to be renewable. And we approached the Tennessee Valley Authority to find out if they'd be able to do that. And they did not have a program in place at the time. And we convinced them to be able to create that. And in so doing, established a model that's scalable. So one example of how we influence others in that regard and really use the campus as a lab is that we were the first to create that program. And very shortly thereafter, we started receiving phone calls and inquiries from peer institutions in the area, as well as from companies, as well as, for example, from the mayor's office at the city. And the mayor's office at the city likewise had a goal to have a certain proportion of its energy consumption be renewable, in their case, by 2025. And we quickly took the time to go and coordinate with mayor's office staff to be able to explain the program and to promote the efficacy of it. And then you'll know, Daniel, when we signed up for our second tranche of renewable energy, that we partnered with the city of Metro Nashville, who is now also signed up at one of those sites. So I think that that's a great example, and we continue to, if you will, advertise in a productive way that program across the entirety of the region. And every day, just as Michael talked about 15 partners and growing with Climate Vault, there are now dozens of organizations, employers, and institutions across the TVA region who have signed up for the program that we created in partnership. I think another example has to do with transportation and mobility. A substantial part of Vanderbilt's carbon footprint comes from people driving back and forth to campus and emitting carbon from their vehicles. And with that in mind, and in partnership with many of our faculty, notably many from the Department of Civil Engineering, Vanderbilt created an aggressive plan, Move VU, with the goal of reducing the number of single occupancy vehicle miles and thereby the amount of carbon being produced at Vanderbilt. And also importantly, to serve as a model for how you create a real transportation demand management program for the city. Meanwhile, there's a federally sponsored program called CMAQ, Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality, whereby the Department of Treasury allocates monies to state departments of transportation to fund investments typically at the municipal or local level to reduce carbon output from vehicles. And grants are typically issued for instance, changing diesel buses over to something less damaging to the environment. And our team, in partnership with our Department of Civil Engineering, went forward through the CMAQ process and made the single largest grant request in the history of the program. And we've been awarded now over $10 million. And so with this, we're implementing sensoring technology on campus. We're creating commuter incentives. We're electrifying our fleet. We're making the campus a more walkable and sustainable place. And we're serving as a model place, not just to make the campus better, but to provide a set of examples to the city and the community, and also to use all of the data and information that comes with the implementation of these programs as an object of study. So along with our faculty, people are writing papers and providing research insight for the entirety of the world through these efforts, while meanwhile we're moving the dial on our administrative objectives around reducing carbon and improving, frankly, the transportation conditions across the city. And also, one more comment, Daniel, quickly, is that we are also always collaborating with peers across the country to talk about what we're doing on sustainability, what they're doing, and to learn from one another. And that's an opportunity that's already provided an opportunity for us through various inquiries and conversations to explain to some of our peer institutions locally and nationally about the Climate Vault collaboration and encouraging others to consider the approach.
Great. And you touched on that a little bit, but I'd like to ask first, Michael, and Eric, come back to you as well on that, which is, kind of how do we engage our campus communities, in these efforts? And there's one way to do people that work, kind of civil engineering or that do transportation research, kind of another way to say this, that's their specialty to do this type of work. But I'm also curious about, what we can do to more broadly engage faculty from different areas. And then of course, how do we engage students in a kind of sustainable way of that, so that they can be part of these efforts, that can be part of both what's happening in the classroom, but also, other ways for them to be to participate in these initiatives and help them develop and explore their own interest in that and make a contribution while they're doing that. Michael, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to go back to Eric after that.
Sure. Look, I think if you compare where we are on campuses and in the country to even just a couple of years ago, we're at a really remarkable moment. and put a different way, climate is having a moment. As someone who's been working on climate change for 20 years, I wasn't sure when that moment was going to arrive, but it's come. And the lucky finger of fate has landed on climate change. And now there's a little bit of like hair on fire reaction, and we just got to start doing stuff. And my own view is if we just start doing stuff, we're going to run out of energy and or money pretty quickly. And there'll be limits on how much we're going to be willing to spend as a society. But the doing stuff kind of has this merging with the engineering style approach. Like, well, we know technically something is feasible. And where I think there's a lot of opportunity is for people to get comfortable with markets and how markets can help produce new ways to solve problems that people haven't already thought of. But also that by being less expensive, by producing less expensive ways to confront climate change, we can actually do more. And so I think there isn't always an appreciation of that. And that's certainly one thing on the University of Chicago campus I would like the students to be more engaged on. And I think there's probably, I'm not at Vanderbilt, I suspect there's probably an opportunity there too. And in many respects, Climate Vault is and the relationship with Vanderbilt is a way to make that point very directly and try and get people's attention focused on it. And so like, if you could get a ton of CO2 for $100 or 10 tons for $100, which one would you choose? I think people don't ask that question enough.
Great, Eric.
Yeah, well, Daniel, part of your question and your comments had to do with how do we engage the campus community, the students, the faculty and staff. And there's really several mechanisms that we use and that we always want to expand on. First of all, myself and the members of our Sustainability and Environmental Management Office and many others on the team are very passionate about these topics, and our offices are always open. So I always would like to say in these kinds of forums, if you have any interest in these things, you should write to me directly and we will find a way for you to get involved. We actively work with our undergraduate students in SPEAR as well as VSG through regular meetings. They advise us, they come up with ideas and programs that we often act upon, and that's been a very productive approach. We also partner importantly with our faculty. So there have been a large or a significant and growing number of courses, typically immersion projects that our faculty have undertaken that have a specific focus on sustainability and efforts here on campus. Let me give you an example. The Fleming Yard renovation, which was really the reclamation and recreation of a sustainable space that heretofore been vastly underutilized, was the product of an engineering design class around sustainable design that myself and members of my team partnered with Professor Lori Troxel on. And we were so impressed with the outcomes that we actually implemented the plan that was created there. In addition, we have a sustainability kind of ambassadors program that our Sustainability and Environmental Management Office runs, where students can sign up. And the idea there is for myself and members of the team to be able to mentor some of the students on our practices, to extend our reach and our voice, and then in turn have those students act as mentors for other students across the campus about what they can do to make a difference.
Great. And I had a couple of questions kind of related to this, kind of global local dimension that we discussed a little bit. So here's a summary of these questions. So the question is, well, it's great that we're doing all of this, but we all know that the real driver of climate change is happening in developing countries, China, India. That's really where these battles are won or lost. So how does that connect with that? And I'll give you my perspective first, and then I'll invite Michael and Eric to speak to that as well. But I think there are two answers to that. One of them is, well, if everybody does what they can do in their own little area, that's an impact, and we want to do that in a way that is uniquely suitable to what we're good at and what our purpose is. But I think there's another thing that Michael touched upon, and Eric, you mentioned in your examples as well, that I think is really important for us is that what universities can do is they can demonstrate that a particular solution is feasible, or experiment with that, or try things out. There can be engines of innovation, and the way we're set up, these are we have a we have open access to our knowledge, right? So the things that we produce, we put out in papers that everybody can read. And in innovation, we can do the same thing. So we can demonstrate to other institutions here, we can do the hard work, as Michael said, try it, be rigorous about it, think it through, and then demonstrate that certain mechanisms actually can be done. And then they can be used by others. And that allows you to scale much faster. It always reminds me a little bit like an academic medical center. You run an academic medical center, of course, because you want to take care, of patients, in your community. But the other purpose of that is that you can now demonstrate, let's say, new surgical techniques that then can be used, around the world. And that's a very important purpose of universities in general, whether it's in academic medicine or whether it is in this particular case in the era or in the questions of sustainability and climate change. So that's at least my sense, but maybe Michael and Eric, you can comment on that as well. This is certainly something that I hear a lot.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take a start at that. First, I completely agree on the engines of innovation. Universities have a central and unique role in that, and it becomes very difficult to measure exactly how large the benefits are, but we know they're large. But ideas spill over, and they improve the world in many different ways. I want to take on the broader point of hey, India, China, and what's the point? What's the purpose? I think there's two ways to view climate change. One is a very binary way, which is, should we have climate change or should we not have climate change? We should, I find that way not actually very useful way to think about it. Like, it's too late, we got climate change. And now we're in the business of trying to figure out how much climate change we can tolerate and we would be willing to have. And there, the actions of individuals, be they people or organizations, are really important. And you mentioned in your opening remarks this idea of the social cost of carbon. That's the benefits of reducing an individual ton, a single ton of CO2. And I think as long as we can get benefits, that is, reduce climate damages from reducing every single ton, then it's a great idea to go ahead. And so let me just do a off the cuff calculation. I think Vanderbilt is producing, in my estimation, global benefits from its relationship with climate fault that are about 10 times larger than what it costs, and seeding the world with reduced climate damages that are going to benefit people in Bangladesh, Moscow, Detroit, and Nashville. And I think that is very important activity.
Thank you. Eric.
Yeah, I'll just, when I think about this idea, Daniel, of innovation and the role of universities, I think you hit it on the head. I'd like to add that, really as a world-class research institution, we're among the most really long-lived and venerable institutions in the world, and we're not going anywhere. And we have a purpose-driven mission around research and innovation and the improvement of health and society and the well-being of the world. And that really means that as stewards of the institution, we have to take, the long view of things. And unlike a lot of companies, we don't think about the implications of our decisions just over the course of days or weeks or fiscal quarters or years, but really rather decades, and even centuries. So I think that it's just encoded in the way we work to be engines of innovation and to provide examples from which other institutions and other countries, frankly, can benefit. And given some of the observations you made about the conditions, if you will, in terms of climate change and the contributions in some of the countries you mentioned, I think that just underscores even further the importance of us doing everything that we can here at Vanderbilt to be leaders.
Well, that was a nice way to wrap things up. So I want to thank both Eric and Michael, for joining me for this, outstanding and informative conversation today. And most importantly, also for the partnership that we put together here. And it's really the result of sustained commitment of what Vanderbilt has been doing, and Michael and his team have been doing over time. And we're very proud and happy to be a pioneering partner in these efforts. And as I mentioned, early on, we're not stopping, and we're not stopping because precisely we need more innovation. We need new approaches. We need approaches that can be used and adopted by others. And then, of course, if our activity can have a direct impact on climate and on the impact of climate change, that's a wonderful thing. So for those of you whose questions were not answered today, I encourage you to reach out and stay connected and learn more. And then to all of you today that took time to participate in our event today, I want to thank you all. I want to thank you for being engaged, for being interested, and for being connected with Vanderbilt. And so as we all sign off, I want to thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of the week, and then we'll all root for the Vandy boys next weekend. All right, thank you.